Hello and welcome to another edition of USISPF's Conversation 6 recordings. I am pleased to be joined by Vikram Singh. Vikram, of course, is our senior advisor for the defense and aerospace practice, but Vikram wears many hats, and one of those hats was former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for South and Southeast Asia. So, Vikram, you've seen India and US strategic partnership very, very closely, and at the outset, a very happy new year to you.
Oh, happy New Year to you, Akshob, and I'm really glad we could have this chat.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been such a very unprecedented times that we live in with the pandemic. And I would say last year was sort of themes of the pandemic and the prolonged war with Afghanistan coming to a crescendo. And of course, we had the inaugural Quad Summit. So before we look forward to 2022, wrap up 2021 in the U.S.-India context with COVID, with Afghanistan, with the inaugural Quad Summit, and a little bit of the Middle East Quad, if we can call it that, with India and the United States coming together with UAE and Israel.
Yeah, sure, a lot in there. So, wrapping up 2021, COVID was obviously the largest disruption and sort of beyond the scale of what anyone would expect, and it hit India particularly hard at the beginning of the year with their terrible surge. But despite all the difficulties of 2021, it was kind of a banner year for U.S. India ties, and that's across the defense and aerospace sector where I'm focused, but also in the economic sector. Trade has grown, and we really see the relationship going from strength to strength. The biggest thing is the depth of the engagement. So the Quad Summit you mentioned actually started with a virtual summit at the beginning of the year, which was followed up by an in-person summit. So this is the leaders of Australia, Japan, India, and the United States. Actually had two summits last year. And they created a really robust affirmative agenda for cooperation in everything from global health to climate to technology, emerging technology, and cyber. And they expanded that into space in the fall. And so what you see is India participating in really dynamic, ad hoc, multilateral forums with the United States in a way we haven't seen before. And the so-called Middle East Quad is another variant of that, bringing together Israel and the UAE and the United States and India. In particularly, it's significant given India's long-standing and good relations with Iran, that India is willing to publicly be affiliated with this Middle East Quad grouping of three countries, along with three countries that are, really stand in opposition to Iran. And so you're seeing India really stretch the parameters of what it's willing to do on the international stage.
Yeah, absolutely, Vikram. You mentioned a keyword variant, and apropos of the times we live in right now, Omicron may have sort of precluded immediate possibility of a 2+2 dialogue, but we know that that's a priority for both Washington and New Delhi, where Minister Jaishankar, Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and Minister Singh will touch base as the first 2+2 that will be done with the Biden administration since they've come to office. And of course, a lot on that, including discussions of, CAATSA that we've been talking about, with Lavrov and Putin visiting India and the S-400 arrivals. There's so much that's all intertwined with 2+2 conversation that happened with India and Russia, and now likely to happen with the United States and CAATSA. Unpack the Washington consensus here on this, because there's so much going on with what CAATSA to sanction, not to sanction, waiver to not waiver. What's the musical chairs looking like?
Well, so okay, a lot in there, Akshob. Thank you. So CAATSA is the Countering American Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. So it requires sanctions on countries that buy Russian military equipment. India is a longtime customer and consumer of Russian military equipment, from dating long before the United States would sell India stuff. That has changed dramatically over the years, with the U.S. becoming a major provider to India, but it hasn't changed completely. And in some areas, like strategic missile systems, the Indians still depend on the Russians. And honestly, the United States has been reluctant or unwilling to sell certain things to the Indians. So the sanctions are out there. And I think they would be pretty catastrophic if they were implemented even in the most narrow, targeted way. You've seen the United States levy these sanctions on Turkey, an ally, and on China, an adversary. So, it's not 100% that India will dodge that bullet. The 2+2 is a critical moment, both for how that's going to be handled by the Biden administration, whether to waive the sanctions or not, whether Congress will support that. I think overall, there's a general sense in the U.S. that they weren't aiming to sanction India, and that India has been moving the right direction from a U.S. standpoint in terms of diversifying where it gets its military supplies from. I suspect it'll come out okay, but it's one of those things that causes bumps in the road for this relationship. But the other thing is, what can they achieve at the 2+2? So you've got this really substantial leader level engagement. Secretary of State Blinken and his counterpart, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, talk a lot. They just talked the other day. They talk kind of all the time. Can they bring something to fruition? Will we see some arms sales, some major new initiatives, some new areas of cooperation? That's what we've got to hope for a 2+2. And we don't yet know whether or when it will happen, but hopefully it will late in January or sometime in February.
Well, on that note, Vikram, thank you so much. These are some riveting insights, and we look forward to the strategic engagement continuing in full force in 2022. Thank you so much for your time, Vikram.
Thanks, Akshob.